Stafford, Swift, Golladay, and others missed practice with injuries. Meanwhile, Kelly Stafford is at it again on social media. And the 1-3 Wolverines have a big game this weekend against Raptors. That's right, a big game against Raptors. Dennis and Brian on what it means if Michigan loses to the Scarlet Knights. Join the conversation by commenting live on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch. This is the Fifth Chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Huh. Brian Chapman, Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth Chapter.
That's right. Welcome to the Fifth Chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian, and we have great news to start out episode 56. Michigan State football will not lose this weekend.
Yeah, and I just checked 10 seconds ago. Troy Weaver did not make a move.
Wow, that's a shock. Is he asleep?
Yeah,
Did his cell phone die like yours?
Wait another 10 seconds. He'll make another move.
Yeah, that's right. I guess we're all on Dwayne Dedman watch because the Pistons acquired him a couple of hours ago, and then like 10 minutes after the trade was made, there were reports coming out saying he's about to get traded again. And then, of course, free agency begins in 4.5 hours. So Pistons fans have had a whirlwind last 48 hours, and it's, I guess, not stopping yet.
It's exciting.
Yes, it is, and we are ready for 5 more fantastic chapters in episode 56. Thank you to everyone who is watching via YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch, and to those who are listening to the podcast via Apple, Google, and Spotify. Obviously, that is available for you to download at approximately 10 or 11 o'clock on the date of each show. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and participate in each show by sending in your feedback via Facebook Live and YouTube. Dennis will be reading it throughout the course of the show. We'll be doing that live. But let's take a look at today's book. In the second chapter, obviously the only thing the biggest news in sports yesterday was the NBA draft, and there are lots of NBA headlines outside of the Pistons, but the biggest story in the NBA was the injury to Klay Thompson. We'll get through all of the NBA headlines, Klay Thompson draft and otherwise, in the second chapter. In the third chapter, Teddy Bridgewater is hurt. He might not play. Christian McCaffrey is out. Stafford, Golladay, Amendola, and Swift missed practice, and Kelly Stafford is at it again on social media. In the fourth chapter, we're going to play fill in the blank with Michigan football. And then, of course, in the fifth chapter, it is the major wager where Dennis and I will try to earn you guys some money. Obviously, it's a little bit more challenging here in Michigan because all the casinos are shut down, at least the ones in downtown Detroit. I don't know about the Native American casinos, but the downtown Detroit casinos are shut down. So if you're not gambling illegally, you're not gambling at all right now in terms of sports betting. But,
wait a second. Kelly Stafford just weighed in. She said she's pissed off she can't go down and bet.
Yeah, the dictatorship in Michigan banned. Now, I wonder if Kelly, to make some money, has been betting against her husband.
Well, she would have more money than she does now if she was doing that.
That's right. And she's got plenty of money to do so, assuming her husband shares. But let's start off with the first chapter, and that takes us to the 2020 NBA draft. We started this week knowing the top 3 picks were going to be Edwards, Wiseman, and Ball in some order, even though you predicted on Tuesday, quote, Ball will fall, and he fell right to the number 3 pick. You were wrong about him falling out of the top 3. We also heard about the possibility of the top 2 picks being dealt away, possibly one of them going to the Pistons, but everybody stood pat in the entire lottery. And we figured that if the Pistons didn't trade up, they'd stand pat at number 7 and maybe purchase a second-round pick, and that's it until free agency. Instead, on Wednesday before the draft, they traded a future first-round pick and a future second-round pick to the Rockets for Trevor Ariza and the number 16 pick. During the draft, they made a 3-way trade that shipped Luke Kennard to the Clippers and brought back Rodney McGruder. and the number 19 pick in the draft. Then they traded away future considerations to the Jazz for Tony Bradley and the number 38 pick in the draft. Additionally, earlier in the week, they traded away Bruce Brown for Zanin Musa and a future second-round pick. Then in the draft, we saw Troy Weaver select French point guard Killian Hayes at 7, undersized Washington center Isaiah Stewart at 16, Villanova power forward Sadiq Bey at 19, and Vanderbilt point guard Saban Lee at 38. Then the purge continued today. About 4 hours ago, the Pistons sent Kyrie Thomas and Tony Snell to the Hawks for Dwayne Dedmon. And as we mentioned just a moment ago, reports are coming out that Dwayne Dedmon is on his way out, and he hasn't even packed his bags in Atlanta yet. So the question first is, why was Troy Weaver so aggressive? And here's what he said after the draft last night.
We just wanted to be aggressive and attack the draft. That's always going to be our way of doing business when it comes to the draft. It gives us a chance to continue to build on the foundation and improve the culture. So we saw fit to be aggressive tonight, and we're excited about moving forward in the future.
So that's what he wanted to do, attack the draft, and that's exactly what he did, Dennis. He didn't spend this week tinkering with the roster. He attacked, he blew it up. What do you think of the moves, and what grade do you give Troy Weaver for his moves so far this week?
Well, I'm going to give him a B. I want to give him an A for the aggressiveness. Aggressiveness in sports works. The one thing I don't like, it's not like these names, all of them, hopefully some of these guys are going to be able to work out, and in a couple of years they're going to be a part of the Pistons when they're ready to make a push into the playoffs and actually ascend through the playoffs, hopefully for a championship. But, I can't tell you with the names that they put out there, a lot of these projects, and we'll see. But being aggressive and moving guys out like they did, you know what? I don't think Bruce Brown's coming back ever to haunt them. And Luke Kennard, I like as a guy coming off the bench, a nice bench piece for a team. Scorer that's looking for some shooting like you get into the playoffs, but that's not the Pistons. And he's in the last year of his rookie deal. So that was the big indicator that, hey, they know their spot. They know where they're at. They know this is a rebuild. This wasn't like, let's keep the guys that we've got, spend money. If you look at the contracts that they're bringing in, none of them, like Ariza's a one-year deal. And the guy they got from the Hawks, he's got
Dedmon.
2 years deal. Dedmon, maybe they'll end up dealing him. But what that tells me is that, they're bringing these different pieces in, young assets to see what they can get out of them, and they're not extending their cap past 2 years. And we know that's where we know that's where Blake Griffin's money ends there. So you're thinking that this could be one of these 4-year plans, but along the way, if you feel like you've got a young, hungry team. You're going to see what you've got, and maybe you find something and just keep building on that so you can get that superstar when then you can make a push. I like the direction. I like the feel of it. Now, whether these guys end up working out or not, the biggest thing I have to admit, I didn't have my phone and sitting there and watching everything, I just, because I broke my phone, I could, usually I would be sitting there with it, but I didn't last night. So I was just taking in the draft and letting it come to me, and I was enjoying it. Here it was, Killian Hayes and maybe Tyrese Halliburton. I know people like the dude on ESPN, like he thinks like, he was like one of the top, 4 or 5 players for sure. And that's the guy that he would have taken. So maybe Halliburton will come back and burn him. I didn't like his jumper. It's not like Killian Hayes has got a great percentage shooting from 3, but I like having Rose and then having, Hayes take over and hopefully he'll be able to work out. But, at some point, it got to be in the teens, and I'm like, this draft is, I don't need to watch this whole thing. I'll just look through it tomorrow. But then I looked online for a second and I saw it just had a proposed trade of Ariza in this first rounder, and I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. So like, what are they running, some kind of Twitter feed or something for people's proposed trades? But then I looked again, and then they were talking about the Pistons acquiring somebody, and it was Isaiah Stewart. I know you said he's a undersized center, but he's got a 7'4" reach. But the biggest thing on everything is I looked at a tweet that you had sent out saying, this is what the Pistons had brought in. This is who they're sending out. It was very nicely done, and it was easy to read. But the one part on there, it said, they gave away a future first-round pick, and I didn't pick up on that until I saw your tweet. So then I went and looked at it, and I'm like, before I looked and saw what the protection was, I was like, you know what? It's not a good move. That's how could that be a good move? Even if you had 3 years protection, and then it's going to be, possibly a lottery pick if you have to relay it in 4 years when there's a double draft. I said, I hate that. I don't care about all these other moves. This is a bad move. But then I saw the 4 years of protection in the top 16, two more in the top 10, and then another one, and it could end up just being at the end, fizzle out to 2 twos. I didn't even know they could do that. So the bulletproof protection that was put in on the future number 1 was amazing to me. I'd never seen anything like that in the NBA. And so after that, considering the different players that they brought in, and they didn't have to give up a whole lot, and then they kept using their $30 million in cap space, and they kept saying, all right, we're going to get this guy, we're going to use a little bit here, we're going to use a little bit here. So they came up today, and they ended up at 0. So
well, I think they've got $9 million in cap space right now.
Yeah, well, the projections that I was looking at, I'll take your word for it there, but it looked like with Dedmon that it was going to be down to 0. But I'll take your word for it.
Well, because when they made that trade, obviously the contracts had to match with Snell, because I think Dedmon's making 13, Snell's making like 12 million, and Kyrie Thomas is making around $1 million. So it does pretty much even out. So they're about they've got about $9 million as opposed to $30 million. So they're not going to be big spenders in free agency. But I look at what Troy Weaver did in the last few days, and I give him a grade of A-. Obviously, I really wanted LaMelo Ball, and I wish he would have traded up to get him. I don't know exactly what the price was, but that's okay given what else happened, because the Pistons needed a point guard, and Weaver got arguably the second best point guard in the draft at number 7, so I like that. I like that they got younger with the 3 picks in the top 19 and the 4th pick in the top 38, although it looked like Saban Lee might have been a huge reach. I wasn't a big fan of drafting an undersized center at 16, who also appeared to be a reach by anywhere between 4 and 12 picks looking at mock drafts. But, he looks like a guy that could play pretty quickly and has a role, perhaps coming off the bench as a bully down low, getting some points in the paint and can block some shots. I did like getting Bay, who was projected to be a late lottery pick and then fell to them at number 19. He can shoot the 3. He's apparently a smart player. Obviously, he comes from a winning program at Villanova. And I like the fact that he blew it up. He wasn't just sitting there tinkering and saying, hey, like you mentioned, we got this piece in Bruce Brown, we got this piece in Luke Kennard. Luke Kennard belongs in a team like the Clippers that just needs a spot-up shooter, maybe a guy that can take 1 or 2 steps, dribble and shoot, and not have to be the leader on the team, not be one of the top 2, 3, 4, or 5 options. Just wait for Kawhi or wait for Paul George to pass on the rock, and then he gets himself 12 to 15 points a game. But on the Pistons, it wasn't necessary. So to flip him for a pick in the teens, I thought was a great move. And if you can get someone who ends up being better than that in the future, then obviously that pick panned out. Plus, like you mentioned, Luke Kennard's going into the final year of his deal. He's going to want and he's going to command more money than he's getting right now. He's going to be getting, $12, $15 million per year, because that's what the market is going to command for him. The reason I cannot give Troy Weaver an A+ is the first pick. And at the time that he made the selection for Killian Hayes, Hayes was second on my board for what the Pistons should do. Number 1 on my board was Denny Avdia. I looked at how things were falling in the draft, and I thought Chicago made a dumb move by taking Patrick Williams, which helped out the Pistons. I thought Cleveland made a dumb move by taking Isaac Okoro. How is he a top 5 pick? And then the Hawks got some inside help with Onyeka Okungwa. But that means you had Denny Avdia on the board. Some people thought that he was the best player in the draft. People were calling him the Israeli Luka Doncic, and they decide to pass up on him for Killian Hayes. If it was up to me, I would have drafted Denny Avdia, and then with the number 16 pick, I would have gotten my point guard with Tyrese Maxey. Hopefully I'm wrong, but that's what I would have done. I would have gone with a guy who had a chance to be arguably the best player in the draft. And outside of one guy who's a basketball writer for The Ringer, I didn't see anybody who thought that Killian Hayes was arguably the best player in the draft.
Yeah, the two players that went right after the Pistons are the two that I would have considered there along with Hayes. And Obi Toppin was sitting there, and you immediately, if you didn't know his game out of Dayton, and you were just going off of the draft there, I mean, how could you not like that kid and his parents immediately with the emotion that he was showing? But yeah, Avdia and Toppin, I wouldn't have minded either of those selections for the Pistons there. But the one thing about Hayes, I liked him more than I liked Halliburton because of Halliburton's shot. You mentioned that second rounder, and that's the one. Like, I know they put all the work in, and Lee out of Vanderbilt came on, in the second half. I can't say that I've watched too much of his game, but who I have watched a lot? Trey Jones for Duke and Cassius Winston for Michigan State. And both of those guys are going to be in the NBA for a long time in nice secondary roles coming off the bench to run a team. I think you can almost bank on that. So, I don't know what he's expecting from Lee. I know he'll back up Killian Hayes and D Rose. So we'll have to see about him. But when you have two guys that are like guarantee rock solid backup point guards that are just sitting there staring you in the face, it felt like he got a little bit cute there. But we'll see. Like I said, I haven't watched too much of Saber Lee, so we'll see how much
Lee's obviously a heck of a lot more athletic than Cassius Winston because that's the biggest weakness for Winston is that he's not that athletic. And I was looking at some of his numbers, and he wasn't a great three-point shooter, 32%, and he wasn't a one and done. He's 21 years old. But he did put up, I think, like 17 points a game for Vanderbilt. Still, a lot of mock drafts didn't have him on the board at all, even through 2 rounds. I saw the Athletics mock draft didn't have him on the board at all. The Bleacher Report mock draft had him as Mr. Irrelevant, the 60th pick in the draft. So it looks like this was a reach. And perhaps they could have taken him as an undrafted free agent. Perhaps they could have, given up a lesser future consideration in order to get him. Obviously, the Pistons are going to come out and say, oh, we had him ranked as a first-round player on our board. But these other folks that know more about the NBA and know more about college scouting than we do, we're saying he's either barely going to get drafted in the late 50s or Mr. Irrelevant, or he's not going to get drafted at all. But, I mean, when you look at the cost, you talk about future considerations, which likely means a heavily protected second-round pick in the future. I'm not going to complain too much about that.
No, and the other thing when you talk about reaches and guys that are going out of position and everything else as judged by other people's mock draft and everything, it is something to talk about 24 hours afterwards. But there's a part about that of being an outlier and taking guys, not crazy, but, taking guys that you might think are a reach, if they turn out, that's really what it's all about until that doesn't work. And then you're like, well, what are you doing? These guys were staring at you, right in the face. And like I said, I don't mind Hayes, Stewart. Here's somebody you can never have enough of a defender or a rebounder who's a man-child with a 7'4" reach, and if he can get out there and guard some of those positionless 5s and 4s, I can see the upside there. But the one thing about this draft here is you're not walking away saying, oh yeah, I think the Pistons, this is a playoff team, and they're going to be contending for a 7 spot or as high as a 6. Nobody's saying that. So their spot, their role, and you kind of feel like, hey, let's just see, let's just get in on the ground floor and let's see for some of these other guys. I mean, you mentioned the guy they got from Brown, the guy they got in the second round's coming overseas too. See if one of those guys can hit, see if they can be some players down the road. So there's some intrigue there, but I think what your role is. I think it would be if everything went perfectly, and you're talking about everything that you would want. Everybody stays healthy. Do I think that they would have a shot at an 8 seed in the playoffs?
Well, you only need a 10 seed to get to the playoffs this year.
Are they expanding the?
Yeah, they announced it. I believe it was on Tuesday, where they're going to have the 7 seed play the 8 seed, and the winner of that game makes the playoffs. They're going to have the 9 seed play the 10 seed. The loser of that game is eliminated, and then the winner of the 9-10 plays the loser of the 7-8 to fill out the final playoff spot. So I think in a scenario.
It was like in the pandemic how they went in there with Brooklyn and everything. That was pretty exciting in Phoenix.
It's similar to that, except it's 4 teams as opposed to 2 teams.
I'm in on that.
I think that with that, you're talking about needing, I don't know, maybe a 45% winning percentage in the Eastern Conference to make the playoffs. If Blake Griffin and Derrick Rose stay healthy throughout an entire 72-game season, and these picks hit pretty quickly, where you got maybe one or two of these guys making the all-rookie team, I think the Pistons could sneak into the playoffs. But I think the more likely scenario is that they trade away most likely Derrick Rose, and perhaps trade away Trevor Ariza. I highly doubt that Blake Griffin's going to get traded, but there's also the potential for injury to either Rose before he gets traded, and of course injury to Blake Griffin, and that would lead to the Pistons tanking once again. And I actually saw a CBS Sports 2021 mock draft where the Pistons are picking number 1. So the Pistons would have a chance to pick not just in the lottery, not just in the top 10, but in the top 5 if they tank correctly and they quickly trade away Ariza and Rose. And we're not going to hope for injuries, but if Blake Griffin does what he's been doing for the last several years, that could lead to the Pistons having an extremely high pick in just a few months.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, Patricia and the boys are like, hey, you can get in playoff contention by, just winning a third of your games. Sounds like, sounds pretty good to us.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the next step for the Pistons and everybody else is what transpires at midnight. And for the Pistons, the big question is what's going to happen with Christian Wood. He made some headlines on Twitter a few months ago when he sent out a tweet that said, and I don't know if this is verbatim, but he said, "I want to win." And obviously, I think that was sent almost immediately after the Pistons were one of the teams not selected to go to the NBA bubble. Well, he sent out another tweet at 2 p.m. today, and I'll put it up on the screen so everybody can see. And it says this: free agency at midnight, I came so far. Now, obviously, if you see a tweet like that and you're a big Pistons slapper, you could be saying, well, he's just saying that because he's come so far and now he can make some money. But when you combine that with the tweet that he sent out several months ago saying, I just want to win, that suggests that he wants to get out of Detroit, because if he stays in Detroit, even if that best case scenario that I mentioned plays out, the Pistons are not going to be a big time winner. Now the key is to see if Troy Weaver can finagle another move for a sign and trade and get something for Christian Wood.
Yeah, sign and trade, I think, is the thing to hope for, because if you're just signing him, I don't think the Pistons have enough money. And, the one thing, they don't have any deals that are more like a big fat deals of over 2 years. So,
well, you can go above the cap to re-sign your own player.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want him to go and extend 3 or 4 years for Wood. That's going to be my point on that. But the sign and trade, I like that idea.
Yeah, do we have some feedback?
We have the most feedback that I've ever seen here. I just see it clicking off. So let me get back to we'll just rip through these if I can find the glasses. Coming in. Keith, what's up, man? I love the aggressiveness of the new GM. I would have drafted Toppin or Danny at pick 7, but I don't dislike Hayes. Would have taken Tillman over Stewart, but I don't hate the pick. Yeah, Tillman was that would have been pretty high for Tillman, who went in the second round, but there were some people that thought he was going to be a second or a late first round pick.
Talking about Xavier Tillman at Michigan State, right?
Yeah, the former Spartan. Greg says, what's up? Sorry I've been distant, just working and relaxing. Chappie all dressed up for this episode with his jersey. No tie, though. He has some laughing faces there. Yeah. Where's your tie? You got that mustache going?
This mustache I've had for years.
Oh, well, what do you got, a beard there too?
New. I mean, I've had this for years too.
Oh, well, maybe it just shows up when you have your. I thought at first you had like a sweater vest on, back like with Jim Tressel.
No, this is Nike. This is a Nike like running type of shirt.
You can't see the piston thing, so like if you didn't look close enough, now you can. But if you didn't look in all, you just look like you were wearing a white sweater vest. Keith says, I told you guys I wanted Patrick Williams, but he went 4th.
Good.
But I see his potential. I like Bay, but I wanted the Kansas point guard Devin Dotson over the Amp Lee's kid, who has potential.
Well, I look, out of the two big men that were, when you compare Patrick Williams versus the guy from Washington, Isaiah Stewart, I'd rather have the guy the Pistons selected, because Patrick Williams, while they might say he's more athletic and he's taller and stuff like that, he came off the bench and he averaged like 9 points a game. Meanwhile, Isaiah Stewart is also a one-and-done guy, and I think he averaged like 18 a game. He was attempting like 6 free throws a game and knocking down 77%. He has an offensive game.
Yeah, around the rim, I think the one thing about Williams is he looks like he's got more of a game that can space out. Like Williams looks like he's just straight up rebounder and defender. I don't see him, casting threes or having some kind of outside
neither
game.
of these guys are going to be three-point shooters, but at least offensively, Stewart can give you something on day one with his ability to bully inside the paint and create shots if he gets an offensive rebound or something like that. I don't know if that's going to happen with Williams, and especially considering Stewart averaged double the points per game.
Yeah, here's more feedback. We got a lot. Let's rip through it. Overall, I give it a B+ because of the aggressiveness and willing to blow it up. This is Keith. Now it only makes sense to trade Blake and Rose. Would not make sense to keep either. Yeah, if they could, they would, believe me. And they definitely want to trade Rose by the deadline. And it's cumbersome when you're talking about Blake. But you know what? I could see the Pistons maybe not being able to do it this year, but being able to take bad contracts or taking contracts that have more years on there. I mean, that's what you do when you're Weaver, hopefully, accumulating some first round picks that you're able to get into the top 10, maybe top 5 or win it. I mean, that's a little bit different than if you're talking about drafting in the top 5 than sitting around saying, yeah, well, McGruber and Hayes and Stewart, some bigger names that way. Kenneth says there seems to be a method to the madness. You agree with that?
I would hope so, yeah. And you know what? Part of the method might be you bring in a guy like Trevor Ariza, not just because of his veteran presence and because that's how you got the draft pick, but it prevents you from being a big spender in free agency. And with Blake Griffin's contract coming off the books in a couple years, you're going to have a 2-year window where these 3 top 19 picks are going to have a chance to make Detroit more of a destination for free agents. If we get, look at Luka Doncic. In 2 years, he became a top 10 player in the NBA. If either Killian Hayes or Sadiq Bey or Isaiah Washington, but let's just start with Killian Hayes. If he becomes a top 5 or top 10 point guard in just the next 2 years, and those other 2 guys in the teens look like really solid NBA pros, then all of a sudden Detroit becomes more of a free agent destination when you have all that money. And we're not even getting to the point about how the Pistons could have a top 5 pick in next June's draft, and how that maybe that's the number 1 pick in the draft, and the Pistons could look like a really appetizing destination. It doesn't make sense to spend money right now on Fred VanVleet in a weak free agent class when in a couple of years it'll look a lot stronger and the supporting cast could be a lot more appetizing for someone who might want to chase a ring.
Yeah, the Pistons' Fred VanVleet is now pronounced Hayes, Killian Hayes or Sabin Lee. Kenneth, saying Cassius Winston is slow and non-athletic, that's why he fell. Yeah, everybody knows why he fell. What I'm saying is that, I never thought Cassius Winston was going to go in the first round. What I am saying is that he is going to have a place in the NBA for 5 or 10 years, running a team, coming off the bench in the second group. And my guess is that he is going to be better than Sabin Lee. And you just have to, if you watch every game for his 4 years, you know what kind of player he is. Yeah, athleticism, we know it's the NBA and all those things. Cassius Winston's going to make it in the NBA. And so's Trey Jones. I mean, you watch him play at Duke. I mean, these guys are ready-made, come off the bench. Now, I'm guessing that Lee has more of a ceiling than these guys, but also somebody that can some flame out.
Lower floor.
Yeah, we'll see on that. I'll put my money on Cassius Winston.
Yeah, all right.
Not like I'm
Michigan
some big
fan putting money in the Spartan. By the way, I did put up a Twitter poll asking people to grade Troy Weaver's last couple of days, and here's what that poll shows. 63.5%, a wide margin, giving Troy Weaver a grade of A, 27.9% giving him a grade of B, 6.7% say a C or a D, and only 1.9% give it an F. There's still 11 hours left to vote. So overwhelming support for Troy Weaver's attempts to blow up the team, and he's still blowing up the team as we speak. And 4 hours from now at midnight, he'll continue to make more moves, we assume.
Yeah, well, let's do it. The one thing about the NBA, it's pretty exciting in the off season, and for the Pistons now, they're joining the fun, and it was a fun draft night. I only thought that they were going to have that pick at 7, and I was sitting there when I got to like 13 or 14, thinking, am I really going to wait around till the second round?
You didn't. You didn't realize that at like, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock, that's when the Pistons made the trade for the 16th pick. So everybody knew that they had that 16th pick except for you. Yeah. So I knew to stay around. Or else I probably would have left after maybe the 10th or 11th pick or after the lottery. But they just kept on making more and more and more deals.
Sometimes it's good to go in blind and not know, not see what Twitter's saying, and just watch it. Just watching Jay Williams and thinking, you know what, I want a smoking jacket and hanging out on the set. Malika Andrews, I'd never seen her. I'd seen her all those months at the bubble just wearing the mask, so I really didn't know she had very pretty eyes. And then she had her mask off there. But I'm glad, after like 4 or 5 picks, she started finally asking different questions than, hey, can you just tell us how it feels? I'm like, come on.
Yeah, she's very attractive. I was disappointed when she was in the bubble and she had that mask on her face all the time. Glad to see it off.
Yeah, but you know what? She looked good in the mask, though. If you could look good in the mask and then you look good out of the mask.
Well,
then,
you don't want her to take it off and her mouth look like she's been growing up in Columbus, Ohio with a whole bunch of Buckeyes. Like, hey, this is my mark of beauty. 6 teeth, fewer teeth than a hockey player.
Yeah, it's a good point. Sometimes I get rid of my double chin or something. I can wear a mask. People are just like, hey, you're looking pretty good. I'm like, yeah, I am. All right. Well, let's get on to the second chapter.
Let's do so.
Oh, you know what? I didn't look at Facebook. Sorry about that. And the comments coming through. I'll do that. But, Chap, while you're answering this question, the rest of the NBA draft here, a lot of different things going on. The big news, like when we found out just a little bit last night about Klay Thompson, maybe that's why the Warriors were reluctant to make any kind of deal. But then we find out today, an Achilles and out for the year for one of the stars in the NBA. What did you think of the whole ball of wax last night?
Yeah, the biggest story in the NBA just happened to be the Klay Thompson injury, and it's that was tough. That was disappointing. The Warriors are my second favorite team. I love the Splash Brothers. I loved their little dynasty, and to see that he missed all of last year with the ACL tear, and then just before the draft he suffers that Achilles tendon tear. We find out today from Adrian Wojnarowski that it wasn't an Achilles tendon tear. It was devastating for the Warriors and the NBA. I mean, first of all, he last year was going into the first year of a 4-year monster contract extension, and now you find out after 2 devastating injuries that half of that contract is going to yield absolutely nothing. And he's not going to be 100% for like a year, so perhaps by the start of next season he'll be 100%. But, I mean, you come back from an Achilles tendon tear, you're not back to 100% of what you were before. Folks are saying that Kevin Durant's going to be just like he was before. That's not the case. He's probably never going to make an all-star game again. So it's very disappointing for him from that standpoint. And you look at the Warriors, everyone was thinking, wow, they lost Klay for the entire season last year. They lost Steph for most of the season last year. They didn't get much of Draymond Green. They're tanking. They got the number 2 pick. This is going to be just like the San Antonio Spurs reloading, and they're going to be better than ever. And now you find out that their second best player is out. It sucks so much that their dynasty didn't get ruined by another great team toppling them and becoming the best team in the NBA. It got ruined because of injuries. I mean, they could have potentially, if not for the Draymond Green situation, had 5 titles in a row. Obviously, everyone knows that he should not have gotten those technical fouls against Cleveland, and that ruined their chances of getting a 4-peat. But then you look at when they lost to Toronto, they lost because Klay and Kevin Durant got hurt. Had they stayed healthy, that's 5 championships in a row. And even if you take away Kevin Durant, he goes away. You look at the roster they would have had if everyone was healthy, they probably would have won in the Orlando bubble. So you're talking about maybe 6 championships in a row, but injuries and the Draymond Green situation cut them down to 6. They had a chance to get right back on track this year with a big man who's athletic and can move in the paint, and now Klay goes down. Now they go from a championship contender to probably a middle of the Western Conference playoff team, 4 or 5,
Yeah, I
6
mean,
seed.
you had a lot of things that you said in there. Not all of them I agree with. The one thing about coming back from Achilles, you certainly you're going to slow down. It could take an extra year. Your minutes are going to be cut. But if you think Kevin Durant's never going to make another All-Star game, I mean, you're crazy.
Well, maybe the fans are going to vote him in.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was the best player in the league when he went down there, and you have to take this with a grain of salt. I mean, I did hear Kendrick Perkins, saying that he's watching him run. I don't know if it was at UCLA or somewhere on the East Coast, but watching him play against, NBA talent, and he said Durant's fully back and 100%. But, he's still going to be one of the better players in the league, I expect. Certainly going to be an All-Star.
Well, he'll be an All-Star because he gets voted in by the fans, but he's not going to be at the same level that he was at 2 years ago. He's not going to be competing for an MVP. And if the fans did not get a vote, I predict that he would just be a good to very good player, but not an All-Star. He's not going to be at that level ever again.
He might not be contending for the MVP this year, but I think the following year that, Durant's not done. Durant's not done, man.
He's got a role, but it's just not as a superstar.
No, I will. So we'll just be on opposite ends of that one. I mean, you got a guy that's got the longest reach and the best game in the NBA at 7'6". He's still relatively. He's got a couple. He's got 3, 4, 5 more years. So don't count out Kevin Durant. I'm not even all that big of a Durant fan the way he left Oklahoma City. But come on, let's not. You're trying to, try out for the Stephen A. Smith show or whatever.
Hey, if he wants to give me that role and that money, I'll take it. But the bottom line is that an Achilles tendon tear is it's more significant than an ACL tear. And guys just don't come back from that as explosive as they were before. Even with missing the entire season, I don't think he's going to be the same player that he was. Is he still going to be able to shoot the ball? Yes. Is he still going to have his same intelligence, the same ability to pass the ball, craftiness? Yes. But is he going to have the same explosiveness getting to the rim, explosiveness with rebounding, things like that? No, that's not going to be there, I predict, and that will lead to a drop-off in his game. Is it going to be so much so that he's going to be a 15-point-per-game role player? No, he's going to be the second best player on the team, but it's not going to be the same kind of 1-2 punch that they have with the Los Angeles Lakers or some of the other teams in the league that have really strong 1A, 1Bs.
Yeah, well, here's my parameters. I think he'll be a top 10 player next year, and I think the following year he'll be back being a top 5 player. So we'll just have to play the long game on this and to wait to expose your hot take. And you know what? I'm patient, so we'll do that.
We'll remember this. One of the other stories of the of the draft was Michael Jordan getting LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball dropped to number 3, and Michael Jordan scooped him up, the greatest player of all time, getting perhaps the greatest player in this draft. And Michael Jordan has had his fair share of lottery picks, but he's never translated one of them into a superstar. And I think only Kemba Walker has turned into an all-star, and then, of course, he left for Boston. This comes a year after he got Terry Rozier, but you're obviously not going to let Terry Rozier get in the way of drafting LaMelo Ball. This is, I think, a really big draft pick for Michael Jordan and his legacy as an owner.
Well, that's fair. You just look at all the picks, down through the line. I think he selected Kwame Brown, right? Or wasn't any? That's the first pick or something. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, not a great track record for Jordan here. The one thing about Ball, his brother, I had a friend of mine getting at me today about why I was so hard on LaMelo Ball and me first and all this other stuff when he reminded me how much I liked Lonzo Ball, and it wasn't anything about his dad. And then he was asking me how much I watched him play, which is not very much. So I was just really going off of that the last name and some of that me first stuff. But you know what? Maybe he ends up being the star here, and if he's anything like his brother with the deftness of the pass and
he's a great passer,
the sixth sense, maybe he'll be the most entertaining player in this draft. Time will tell. All right, chap. Paul on Facebook wants to talk some hockey, college hockey.
Shocker.
Yeah, you know what? He's watching Michigan. He's watching us, and he's watching Michigan play Wisconsin. So let's get to the third chapter.
All right, let's do so. And as we head to the third chapter, that takes us to the Detroit Lions. And there are a few things to discuss with this team. Sunday, the Lions, the same old Lions, take on the Carolina Panthers. And this is a game that's I guess you could say it's important for the Detroit Lions because they have a chance to get to 500, but it's a couple of bad teams facing off. And if you're looking at this game in terms of fantasy football players, if you're looking at this game not a Panthers fan or a Lions fan, this is going to be an exciting game to watch. Odds are no is going to be the answer because not only is running back Christian McCaffrey out for the game, who would have been the best player on the field, but we've got quarterback uncertainty. Teddy Bridgewater has a knee injury, was limited in practice yesterday. Now today, Ian Rappaport of NFL Network said that it's unlikely Teddy Bridgewater is going to play. Matt Stafford has a partially torn thumb ligament in his throwing hand and did not practice at all yesterday. I'm not sure what his status was today. Additionally, on the injury report today, Kenny Golladay didn't practice with a hip injury. Danny Amendola, no practice with a hip injury. And in a major surprise, DeAndre Swift missed practice. He's in concussion protocol. This is not an injury that he suffered during the game on Sunday because he was a full participant in practice yesterday. So a lot of uncertainty, and so much uncertainty that there's not even a betting line. But obviously, if the Lions win, they'll get back to 500 and make it more difficult to fire Quinn and Patricia. What do you think about the injuries in this game, particularly with the quarterbacks? And do you think the Lions are going to come up with a big SOL win or big SOL L on Sunday?
Yeah, so who are we talking about? Like P.J. Walker or something, the backup quarterback for Carolina, who was in one of those, I'm not call them rogue leagues, but one of those like USFL type leagues.
Or Will Greer.
One of the or the quarterback out of West Virginia, and then the Lions backup. I mean, how do you even make a prediction when it comes down to these guys here? You know what? I would like the Lions when I would think about their supporting cast, but when you're thinking about, and I know Mike Davis has been pretty good in filling in for McCaffrey, and they do have DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel over there, but I tend to think that they'll have some fans because it's Carolina, right? So they'll have a little bit of crowd noise there, but if it's not Stafford, I'll take the Panthers in that game.
Yeah, I think that Stafford is going to play. He hurt his thumb in the last game, I believe in the first quarter, and didn't miss a snap. And he ended up with his highest passer rating of the season. So I don't expect that thumb to be a major factor. It is strange that he would miss practice, but perhaps they're just being as cautious as possible with this situation and don't want him to aggravate it.
Maybe he had to patch up, what his wife was rolling out there on social media today. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, maybe he punched her cell phone to get her off of Instagram. But, with Bridgewater likely out, you think that heavily favors the Lions if Stafford's going to play. But then you see 3 out of the top 5 weapons are missing practice today. If you got DeAndre Swift with a concussion and out today, that likely means that he's not going to play in the game on Sunday. And then your top 2 receivers are out as well. That's a big loss. And if they are going to play on Sunday, if they're missing practice on Thursday, not even limited participants, how effective are they going to be? It's going to be a terrible game to watch, terrible for the offense, anybody's game. I'll go with the Panthers right now, but that's subject to change based on who's playing and who isn't playing. That's for certain.
Yeah, Greg says P.J. Walker will throw all over the Lions defense. That kind of prediction is not like I'm sitting over here saying, "Oh, you're crazy, Greg." I mean,
I'm not either.
I know most of my life, that's kind of what's happened with the Lions, so I completely understand that prediction. He also says that it's an SOL with no Swift or Stafford, but the rookie could throw all over this defense. Yeah, that's it. But I think Stafford would be the difference. Now, if he doesn't play, I'll take the Panthers. So.
Yeah, and in terms of the impact on the schedule and the course of the Lions season, obviously if they win this game, they could play awful football. And I went through this scenario on Tuesday. That gets them to 500. Then Thanksgiving, they got the 2-win Texans, whose wins have been against Jacksonville and Jacksonville. And then you win that game, and all of a sudden you have a winning record, tricking fans into believing that you're a great team. And then the game after that, you're going to have a week and a half to rest before you face the Bears, whose top 2 quarterbacks are out. You could be sitting at 3-3 after playing 3 terrible football games to sit at 7-5.
All right, before we get to the 4th chapter, Keith indicates, he's hoping that the Lions lose so they can get Quinn and Patricia out of town. Also get Stafford and his whiny wife out of here. She needs to just be quiet. Let's get a comment in on Kelly Stafford today, who put out an Instagram post. Are we going to... We got the quote of what she said?
Oh, no, we've got the video, and here is...
Play some of it?
Yeah, okay. We'll play it for you. Here's what she said on Instagram.
Very blunt. I'm so over it. I'm over living in a dictatorship that we call Michigan. I understand there's a pandemic, and I understand it's very scary. I'm scared of it too. If you are at risk, do not leave your house until there's a vaccine. But shutting down all these small businesses, things that people have worked their life for, shutting them down again is not the answer, because they will not make it. So once we are able to leave our house, once this dictatorship decides to let us have some freedom, there will be nothing left. I'm just over it. I see all these people, and it brings me like to tears. Believe me, I know there's people out there that are stating, that's really ignorant of you. How could you say that? Listen, I know not everybody's going to agree with me. Not everybody's going to agree with my every move I make. That's life, okay? We state our opinions, we move on. This is my opinion. I feel for these small businesses. I feel for... It's not that I don't feel for the people that have COVID or the hospitals. I do. But this is my opinion. I do not feel like... I do not like living in a place where they tell me what I can and cannot do. I live once. Again, this is my opinion. You have yours. Everyone has their own. Very blunt.
There you go, Kelly Stafford, talking about living in a dictatorship in Michigan. And look, there's a lot that you can take out of this when she's sitting there talking about, trust me, I care about the people that are getting sick, but these businesses, that's what makes me really sad, that you work all your life for a business. News alert, people also work all their lives to be alive. And, she's sitting there talking about a dictatorship. Now, she did go on Instagram later in the day and say that she wishes that she hadn't said dictatorship, but she said the word twice, and she didn't seem like that was a slip-up. That seems like something she meant. And the other big thing about this is when she says, I'm tired of living in a dictatorship in Michigan, and she's got her house for sale, yeah, that's more of a sign that she wants to move out of Michigan with her husband, Matt Stafford, and Stafford's days in Detroit are numbered.
I agree with that last part. Like, there's a lot of signs here, and that the Lions are going down the tubes. He's not really playing really well, and there's likely going to be a new head coach and general manager. I think that adds up to them being on their way out. Look, I'm a little sentimental when it comes to Matt Stafford playing on the field here because I do think it's his last year. Although I do think that the Lions should move on, and it feels like Kelly Stafford said what she felt, and then somebody said, you know what, let's just go ahead and retract that and say you're sorry, and then we'll just move on from here. Maybe your husband said that or somebody else, but the first thing that you say to somebody like that, like, you get everybody's frustration about it, but you just say, well, what if you're somebody that has to go out there? Like, I get the part about like wanting to be out there and then telling people that are old or have an underlying condition, hey, you guys stay home and protect yourself, because it really is on them. Like, if you're counting on other people, it's not going to work. So if you do have an underlying condition, unfortunately, and me and my house, that's the situation that I'm in. I can't go out because I can't trust anybody, or I can't pick up this virus. It'd be deadly, big time, for my family. But what if I had to, like so many people, go out and work? Like, that's the part. It's like not everybody can just take the choice to say, you know what, I'll just stay home. There's people that have an underlying conditions that still have to go out there and work. And for them, that's the one that's part of it. But look, there's no solution to this. I mean, that's the thing. Like, and we still have.
That wearing a mask makes it more difficult to spread the coronavirus, and that the coronavirus spreads from person to person. So limiting the places where people can go and interact with each other is a great way to do so. And obviously, when you go to a bar, you're going to be social.
Yeah, I don't know about a great way, but it's the only thing that we have right now that they're saying that can try to get us out of it. So from that. Like, people don't trust the science. They don't trust the government. They don't trust that the mass anyway. There's a lot of people that don't. Like, they're hearing you and they're saying, yeah, chap, we hear this all rolling out there. We don't believe any of it. Now, it's not just a small minority. There's a heck of a lot of people that are just like Stafford that are like, let's get on with it. Let's get out there. If you're sick, stay home. We're not.
Yeah, well, you know what? I have a real problem with people like Kelly Stafford. And it just shows her selfishness when she just sits there and says, you know what, if you're sick or if you're old, just stay home until it's over. This pandemic has been going on since February or March in this country. I think about people like my parents. My dad is 70. My mom, she don't want me telling her age, but she's a couple years behind my dad. They retired in the last few years. They're staying at home, but they didn't work hard all their lives so they can spend their golden years locked up inside while Kelly Stafford and everybody else go out running wild, having as much fun as they want to, spreading coronavirus, knowing they're not going to get sick. It'd be nice if they cared enough about those older people that they stayed their ass inside and waited until the coronavirus was gone so that everybody could have a good time, not just so that Kelly Stafford and her BFFs could do whatever they want to. But she don't care.
Well,
she's moving from mansion to mansion, not caring.
Yeah, you know what? I think deep down she does care, but that wasn't a good. She didn't look good today doing that. That's for sure.
All right, let's turn the page to the fourth chapter unless we have some feedback.
Yeah, Chapman. No, let's see. I have to get down here. Kelly Stafford's a spoiled rich girl. Let's see. Frontline workers have to work. Put on a mask.
In some countries, in a lot of countries around the world, they don't talk about how I want to have my individual freedom. I want to do this, me. They just all do it. They actually have dictatorships in some of those places, but they just do it for the greater good. And here, it's like we're abusing the freedoms that we have by saying, well, let me just go out and do it. And you old people, you sick people, stay inside and watch me party through the windows until the coronavirus has gotten through the entire population via herd immunity or we get vaccines for everybody. In other countries, they don't do that.
Yeah, it was a bad look. And Ken brings up the good point there. Like and I was talking about some people had to go out there and work, to survive. And then you have people that have to go to work and frontline workers that, could be, really maxed out because of this situation. Things that we don't think about. We always hear like, it's, herd immunity. It's going to happen anyways. Let's let it run its course.
Yeah. Meanwhile, people are dying because of herd immunity.
Yeah, right. So let's get to that fourth chapter, and that gets us to, we were going to put Michigan State in this, but as you know, the game against Maryland has been canceled, and we want you to fill in the blank. And do I have Michigan beats Rutgers? Fill in the blank. Chapman.
Well, no, it was if Rutgers beats Michigan State, blank.
Wait, Rutgers already beat Michigan State.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think if Rutgers beats Michigan.
Oh, if Rutgers beats Michigan,
yes.
Then fill in the blank. Oh,
yes.
I wrote it down wrong.
Oh, that's all right.
Sorry about that. Well, you go first.
Yes.
While I formulate my opinion.
Well, yeah. Here's how I fill in the blank. If Rutgers beats Michigan, Jim Harbaugh needs to be fired after the season unless he beats Ohio State. This is not a situation where we need to hear about a peaceful transition of power. We don't need to hear about let's not hurt Jim Harbaugh's feelings because he was a great football player. This is not about let's coax him gently to go to the NFL. We don't need to hear about him riding out the final year of his contract because he's the only Power 5 football coach with 1 year plus left on his deal. If you are having a disappointing 5.5-year tenure at Michigan, and it ends after 6 years without beating Ohio State. If you're sitting here with a 1-4 record, your QB room is the worst that it's ever been. And matter of fact, the worst that it's been in Michigan since the days of Nick Sheridan and Stephen Threet. And now you can't even beat Rutgers. And you have to fire Harbaugh unless he beats Ohio State.
Yeah, if Michigan loses to Rutgers, the Harbaugh era, I would think, would be over. I already think there's a chance that it's going to be over anyways, but if they go out and lay an egg, and it's not like they're just losing. That was the worst home loss in Michigan Stadium history. And, they brought a bunch of pillows out there. They seem like they got issues in the locker room. They lost to Michigan State as a 25-point dog because of a stubborn defensive coordinator who's just one-dimensional. I mean, it's there's a lot of issues here. Like, you could try, and there's an argument. It's not a great argument because there's better arguments about hopefully Harbaugh will move on or you need to move him on. But there is an argument about him staying around. But if he loses Rutgers, I mean, that argument is pretty much out the window. And then if you're pinning your hopes on a miracle victory over the Buckeyes, I got news for you. I mean, that's not happening. So I think that's a long fill in the blank. So let me just fill it in quicker. If Michigan loses to Rutgers, the Harbaugh era will be over.
Yeah, and it needs to be over whether he wants it to be over or not. If Michigan has to fire him, then they should do so. If he finds a job before the Ohio State game and says, hey, I'm moving on to the Jets, but I want to finish out the season, then that's fine, and they can have the nice little going away ceremony when he leaves 0-6 with losing to Rutgers in his final year, losing to Michigan State in his final year, finishing with a 3-6 record. But if that doesn't happen, and he wants to stick around for the last year of his contract, they shouldn't sit around and talk about, well, Harbaugh brings in a whole lot of money for the football program, or he just lights up the room, and he was coached by Bo Schembechler. They need to say, you're out, you're fired, you're gone. If they need to bring Donald Trump in to ensure that he's gone by having him come in and say, you're fired, do it. You can't go around and go 0-6 to the Buckeyes, have a 1-4 start, lose to Rutgers, and if you lose to Rutgers, and you're talking about a 2-6 or 3-5 season, you can't do that.
Yeah, well, you don't have to do it exactly the way you said, like point at him like Trump. But if he loses to Rutgers, you just say, hey, Jim, hopefully you find an NFL job, or we're going to have to actually show you the door. So you don't have to point your finger at him and say you're fired.
He lost to freaking Rutgers, losing to Michigan State, 0-6.
I'll tell you what, he's lucky if they lose to Rutgers that there won't be any fans at that Michigan-Penn State game because, man, I can only imagine if I was sitting in there and they lost to Rutgers and then, here comes the winless Nittany Lions and here come the Wolverines who apparently just half-heartedly went out there and touched the banner they touched the banner as they were yawning last week. There'll be a lot of a chorus of boos, raining down Michigan Stadium.
If you're a student,
Rutgers, I know it's a pandemic and everything else, but I think if they lose to Rutgers, I might drive out beyond the stadium and just boo outside the stadium. Boo!
Yes. I was going to say, if you're a student and you're on campus, because I think the students leave for Thanksgiving break on Tuesday, bring loudspeakers, bring boom boxes or whatever, and put CDs in the boom boxes that have the booing sound and just blare it outside of the football program. Show up for the Michigan-Penn State game next Saturday and just blare it so that it picks up on the ABC or the FS1 speakers, hearing fans outside booing, and then have a march outside trying to get Harbaugh fired. Do whatever. I mean, this you can't lose to Rutgers.
Streak down Main Street. It's over.
Yes.
Maybe one of these bull horns. Now that you're out, I was going to say, booing outside the stadium. That would, great standing there by yourself. But you get a bullhorn out there.
And you get 10,000 students outside, socially distancing.
We don't want to slow down, Kelly. We don't want to encourage mass gatherings.
Socially distance. Everybody's 6 feet apart. You can yell through your mask, but just boo, boo, whatever it takes to get your point across.
Kelly Chapman.
No, do not mix me up with Kelly Stafford. I would like to mix up my bank account with her, but otherwise, no.
You're a little Karen or Kelly there. I can tell.
So
Okay. Well, We're in on that one. We're kind of in agreement. That gets us to the fifth chapter, is where we gamble.
Yes, it does. It's time for the major wager. What are you looking at for this weekend?
Well, I'm looking at my wounds, man. I was having so much fun over the course of these, 56, 55
56?
shows. So I would say up to like, episode 54, where I was gambling. I thought smartly, and then I was just going to see, how I would do. Kept really good track of the future bets, all the bets that I was making, and I was just rolling in it, man. I was hitting left and right. I got up close to 800. But then the last couple of weeks, I've just been I'm doing what gamblers aren't supposed to do: pressing, throwing bigger numbers at it, trying to. And I went all the way back, and I am now down to zilch. So I am back to 0. And I did put 50 on the Chiefs on the Sunday night game. I'm going to go to the Browns. The Browns burned me a few times this year, but they're giving up 3 points here. They're at home. I'm going to put 50 on the Browns, too. 50 on the Browns, 50 on the Chiefs. Those are my 2 bets this week.
Well, I, on Tuesday, picked Iowa to cover the 2.5 spread against my Nittany Lions. I hope that I'm wrong, but Iowa looks good right now. The Nittany Lions are one of 3 Big Ten East programs with a quarterback controversy right now. I'm going to go to the NFL. The Bengals are a 1-point road underdog to Washington FT. If you look at the money line, the Bengals are at plus 105. Washington FT only scored 3 points in the first 40 minutes against that sorry, same old Lions defense. And I like Joe Burrow and that Bengals offense a little bit more than the Lions offense. So I'm going to take the Bengals to win straight up. Bengals plus 105 on the road against Washington FT.
Good bet, chap. One last on the feedback. It's Greg who says, if you guys noticed that Harbaugh used to get a lot more upset at the officials and tear off his headset. I hear, there is no motivation from Harbaugh. His comments during the post games are dull and boring. You know what? Yeah, you know what? Everybody notices that, Keith. Like his demeanor in the Monday news conferences after the game, instead of him showing any emotion, it's just been like, yeah, we're just going to coach him. We got to get better. Those kind of things. It's very boring. There's a couple thoughts here. One is that some in the administration told him to tone it down. I don't believe that. I think he's toned it down. Once you start getting, it's not like you can go out there and start taking shots at Urban Meyer and everything when you're 0 for. When you're not winning any bowl games, all of the look at me, I'm incredible, check me out. I'm going to throw my headset. I'm going to say things about, quirky birds, and I'm going to birth calves, and I'm going to take shots at Fine Bottom, all that stuff. He's toned it down because it looked ridiculous to begin, but it was bravado and the young recruits. It was all about, hey, maybe we can get some recruits with this. But when you're losing, you got to change direction. You can't get out there and act like, hey, we're the best. Who's got it better than us? And everybody's like,
lots of teams, most of the Big Ten.
Right now, maybe Rutgers.
Michigan State.
Yeah. Apparently anybody that's, strapping him on right now. So there's the other theory, and this is the one that I'm buying. He's got a really young team, and getting in there and reading them the riot act and everything, and it is not the way to go. But it's noticeable. It is. You would like it. It's still like there are times like Monday, when he's getting pressed about his future and everything else, where he gets out there and shows some emotion, like whatever it is, banging the chair. We're going to show up, I can guarantee, we're going to play for pride, and just saying like, yeah, get out there.
Well, the team is feeding off of that lack of energy.
I agree. So, yeah, at some point there's a couple different, things you could try, a couple different things you got in your quiver. Let's pick it up and, let's get after it. That particular one, I would like to see it. All right. Well, we'll see what happens this weekend with all the football. We'll be back in a Thanksgiving weekend, or Thanksgiving week with a short week. We'll be here on Tuesday. So thanks for watching. And for Brian Chapman, I'm Dennis Fithian. So long.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fith chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fith chapter.